Okay, so let's dive in. Think about rehab for a second. You probably picture, those really tough repetitive exercises. Well, imagine if healing felt more like playing a game. Maybe even, dare I say, fun. That's kind of what we're exploring today. This amazing intersection of tech and human recovery. We're talking vision-based, serious games, virtual reality, all for motor rehab. And our goal, your mission for this deep dive, is really to get you up to speed fast. We want you to understand where things stand now, how effective it actually is. We are seeing real improvements, better balance, movement, people sticking with therapy longer, and importantly, what needs to happen to push this whole field forward.
Exactly. And uh, the basis for our discussion today is this really thorough systematic review. It's by Ide and colleagues, published in the International Journal of Medical Informatics. And this isn't just a quick glance. They looked at 86 clinical studies, so it gives a solid evidence-based view of how this tech is being used. But here's the interesting part. While lots of studies report these systems are effective, and you hear good things anecdotally, the research itself, well, it often lacks the clarity and sort of standardization you need to really compare results properly. And that's what we want to dig into. We'll also look at how engineers and clinicians can maybe improve things going forward.
That's a really interesting tension to start with. You've got this huge promise, but maybe the science backing it up needs tightening. So let's start with the basics then, the why. Why are these vision-based systems such a big deal, particularly for motor rehab? What makes them stand out from, say, traditional therapy or even other tech?
Yeah, good question. There are several core advantages, really. First off, they're becoming more affordable and accessible. That's huge. It means they can be used more widely, not just in fancy clinics, maybe even at home.
Okay, cost is always a factor. What else?
Well, hand-free interaction is a major one. Think about patients with limited motor control. They don't have to hold anything. They interact just using their body.
Right, that removes a barrier straight away.
Totally. And the data collection is non-invasive. It just visually tracks movement. No need to stick sensors all over someone, which is great for motor rehab specifically.
Less intrusive.
Plus, and this is key, they tend to be really intuitive and engaging. Patients use natural movements, which makes them want to do the therapy more. Motivation goes up.
And consistency is everything in rehab, right?
Absolutely. And these systems give real-time feedback, visual cues. Sounds right when you make a movement. That immediate feedback is critical for learning and tweaking how you move. Much harder to get that so instantly with traditional methods sometimes.
Okay, those are some pretty strong selling points. Makes therapy feel less like a chore, more interactive. But I wonder, are there downsides? Or situations where maybe the old-fashioned hands-on approach is still better? Did the review touch on any limitations where this tech might fall short?
That's a fair point. The review mostly highlights issues with the research quality rather than saying the tech itself is inherently flawed for certain tasks. For example, the lack of long-term follow-up in many studies. We see benefits during the study, but do they last? We don't always know.
Ah, okay. So it's more about proving long-term value.
Right. And also, for really fine, specific motor skills, intricate hand movements maybe, a skilled therapist providing that direct tactile feedback might still have an edge currently. These systems are fantastic for gross motor skills, for motivating repetition, but that superfine precision, it's still evolving in the tech.
That makes sense. You can't fully replace that human touch and expertise for everything. Okay, so we have clear benefits, growing tech. Is this reflected in the research activity? Is it a booming area? And who's leading the charge, technologically and geographically?
Oh, absolutely booming. The review showed a big jump in studies between 2007 and 2018. It really peaked around 2014, 2015. Shows a lot of scientific interest.
And where's this research happening?
Geographically, Asia's actually ahead with 36% of the studies. Europe's next at 31%, then North America at 24%. And within those, Korea and the USA published the most papers included in this review, 15 and 14 respectively.
Interesting distribution.
But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Remember the Microsoft Kinect for the Xbox?
Yeah, definitely. The motion sensor thing. We had one.
Exactly. Well, that device, it played this huge role. It came out late 2010, and suddenly, boom, loads more studies using it.
Yeah.
Like 48 out of the 86 we looked at.
Wow, really? Just from that one consumer device? That's amazing.
Yeah, because Microsoft opened up its software development kit, its APIs. So researchers and developers could actually build their own rehab games relatively easily. Something like 42% of the Kinect studies use these custom-built prototype games.
That's incredible. So its discontinuation must have had an impact too. I remember they stopped making it.
It did seem to correlate with a dip, yeah. That and the shutdown of another key platform, OpenNI, around 2013.
Mm.
But, tech moves on. Now you've got new low-cost depth cameras from Intel, Orbeck, even Apple's getting involved. So the field's definitely not dead. It's just evolving beyond Connect.
It really is fascinating how a gaming gadget kind of accidentally turbocharged medical research makes you wonder where the next boost will come from.
Okay, so we know why it's important. We know the tech involved. Who is this actually helping? Which patients are benefiting most according to these studies?
The studies focus on a few key groups. Stroke patients are the biggest one. They account for 42% of the studies looked at. And a lot of those are randomized controlled trials or CTs.
Gold standard, right? Exactly. So that suggests a pretty solid user base and research focus there. Then you have cerebral palsy, CP. That's about 20% of studies, often focusing on kids. Those tended to be smaller, uncontrolled trials, maybe because patient groups are smaller or more varied.
Okay, stroke and CP. Anyone else?
Yes. A really significant finding was the focus on the elderly. Over half the studies included participants over 55. They're looking at things like improving balance, postural control, reducing fall risk, which is critical with aging populations globally.
That makes a lot of sense. Falls are a huge issue.
Definitely. And then you also see studies, though fewer, on Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, traumatic brain injury, TBI. So
Right.
it's quite broad, but stroke, CP, and aging-related decline are definitely the main areas getting attention.
Okay, clear focus areas. Now, what are people actually doing in these games or virtual environments? Is it just general play, or are the tasks really specific to therapy goals?
Oh, very specific. The review breaks it down into 5 main categories. The biggest category, tied for first actually with 37 studies, was balance and postural control. Think tasks like reaching out, leaning, shifting your weight side to side, stepping, all core stability stuff.
Okay, makes sense for fall prevention and general mobility.
Right. The other big one, also 37 studies, was upper extremities rehab. So shoulder, arm, elbow, wrist, hand movements. Things like lifting, reaching, grasping, waving, maybe interacting with virtual objects.
Like catching things or reaching targets on screen.
Exactly that kind of thing. Then fewer studies, only 4, focused specifically on lower extremities, rehab stepping, weight shifting, knee bends. 7 studies looked at broader physical fitness and muscle strength, using more whole body movements. And finally, 4 studies targeted sight movement coordination and visual perception, eye-hand coordination, coordinating arm and leg movements.
Quite targeted.
Very. And the key thread the review mentions is that these activities were designed within a, quote, fun and encouraging environment where motivation was a priority. It's that blend of therapeutic exercise within an engaging game context.
That blend sounds ideal. Rigorous goals wrapped in something motivating. It paints a really positive picture. But you mentioned earlier there were issues with the research quality itself. The elephant in the room, you called it. Let's talk about that. What are the scientific hurdles here?
Right, this is crucial. Despite all the promise, the review found significant weaknesses in many studies. A major one is just lack of clarity and standardization in how things are reported. Makes comparing studies really tough. They used a quality checklist, the Downs and Black checklist, to rate the study.
How did they score?
The average score was, well, pretty modest, 13.44 out of a possible 28.
Oof, that's barely half marks. What does that low score actually mean in practice?
It means a few things. Some studies didn't describe their main findings very well. Others didn't use standard, validated ways to measure outcomes.
So different studies measuring success in completely different, maybe unproven ways.
Pretty much. Imagine trying to figure out which approach works best if everyone's using a different ruler. There were also common problems with reporting recruitment, like how many people were eligible versus how many actually joined, why did people drop out, and things like randomization, how people were assigned to groups, whether the assessors were blinded, often poorly described.
Blinding patients must be hard though, right, if you're playing a VR game?
It is very hard, almost impossible for the patient. But you can often blind the person assessing the outcomes, and that wasn't always clearly done or reported.
Okay, so it sounds like maybe a bit of a Wild West situation scientifically. Lots of activity, but not enough common rules or reporting standards.
That's a decent analogy, yeah.
Yeah.
And it gets worse. Many studies had tiny sample sizes, like just 1 or 2 participants sometimes.
Seriously. How can you draw conclusions from that?
You really can't draw strong clinical conclusions.
Yeah.
And nearly half the studies didn't even have a control group to compare against.
Wow. No comparison group.
Nope. Plus, the length of the therapy varied wildly. One session, a few weeks, several months. Hard to compare apples to apples. And get this, across the 86 studies, they used about 180 different measurements or outcome measures.
180.
Yep. And many of those weren't previously validated tools. So again, it makes comparing effectiveness incredibly difficult. It really begs the question, how do we get the research quality up to match the potential of this technology?
That is the critical question, isn't it? If the tech is promising, but the studies are hard to compare or trust, how do we fix that? What's the solution? Especially for the engineers and designers building these systems, how can they do better science?
Well, the review doesn't just point out problems, it actually proposes a way forward. They outline a research methodology aimed particularly at engineers based on the review findings and that Downs and Black checklist. It hits 5 key areas.
Okay, let's hear it. What's step one?
First, clearly define the aim of the study. Be specific about your primary goals and hypotheses. What exactly are you trying to train or improve? Posture, balance, memory, reasoning. Get specific.
Foundational stuff. Makes sense. What's next?
Second, describe the target population in detail. Don't just say stroke patients. What type of stroke, how long ago, age, sex. What were the exact inclusion and exclusion criteria? How many people did you try to recruit versus how many participated? Why did anyone drop out? Transparency is key.
Right, so others can understand exactly who the results apply to. Number three.
Third is selecting the therapy. This has 2 parts. Part A, outcome measures. Use a mix. Include standard, validated clinical tests, things like the Fugl-Meyer score, Berg Balance Scale, Timed Up and Go test. Tests clinicians already know and trust, but also include subjective measures, questionnaires about usability, how fun it was, immersion, satisfaction, capture both the clinical outcome and the user experience.
Okay, a holistic view. And the other part of selecting therapy.
Part B, technology description. Be thorough. What system, platform, interface, commercial game, or prototype? Crucially, detail the specific body parts, movements, and gestures involved, especially focusing on the impaired limb or function. Enough details so someone could replicate it.
Got it. Clinical measures, user feedback, and tech specs. What's the fourth area?
Fourth, study design. Be crystal clear about the type. Is it an uncontrolled trial, UCT, a controlled trial, CT, or a randomized controlled trial, RCT? Describe your randomization method, how you concealed groove assignments, any blinding procedures like blinding the assessor, and they strongly recommend doing an RCT whenever it's feasible, especially if you have enough participants.
Aim for the gold standard if possible. Okay, and the last one.
Finally, number 5, vision-based interaction features. This covers the technical and environmental specifics, like the type of interaction. Is it natural, intuitive? Does it give real-time visual and audio feedback? They specifically mention mirror feedback, letting patients see themselves on screen as being really powerful for body awareness.
Ah, interesting, like a virtual mirror.
Exactly. Then interface design. Make it inclusive, friendly, attractive, especially for users with disabilities. Keep motivation high. Also, environmental factors. Where did the therapy happen? How much space was needed? How far from the screen? Lighting conditions. Was a therapist supervising? Details matter.
Practical stuff.
Yep. And lastly, accessibility. What's the cost? How easy is it to set up and calibrate? Following this kind of structured approach, they argue, would massively improve the quality and comparability of research in this area.
That sounds incredibly thorough. It really tackles most of the issues you raised, the lack of clarity, the non-standard measures, the poor reporting. Okay, so this whole deep dive. It's shown us this amazing potential, right? Tech meeting human need in a really engaging way. Vision-based games, VR, clearly not just toys, they're serious tools for rehab. But as with so many cool new things, there are these growing pains, especially on the research side, open questions we need to address.
Precisely. And if we zoom out to the bigger picture, even with the encouraging short-term results, there are still gaps we need to fill. One big one is long-term efficacy. Most studies don't follow patients long enough to see if the benefits stick in the real world outside the lab or clinic.
Right. Does it translate?
Exactly. Another issue is the industry versus academia gap. Lots of companies sell these systems to hospitals, but they don't always publish their data. So the published science might not even reflect the full picture of how these are being used or how well they work in practice.
That's a problem for building shared knowledge.
It is. And then there's safety and monitoring,
Yeah.
especially with these controller-free systems where people are moving their whole bodies. We need better ways to monitor particularly vulnerable users like the elderly to make sure they aren't doing movements incorrectly or unsafely over time without direct supervision.
Good point. Safety first.
And finally, just the practical hurdles. These like needing a fair bit of open space for some systems to track properly, or just getting clinicians and institutions to fully embrace and integrate new tech. Those adoption barriers are real.
So, wrapping this up, what does it all mean for you, listening? It means the future of rehabilitation might genuinely involve playing a game, which is pretty exciting. It could make therapy more motivating, more accessible, and it's a big, but also really underscores how crucial good science is. Rigorous studies, clear reporting, common standards, that's what turns cool tech into truly reliable, safe, and effective healthcare. It's a reminder that real innovation isn't just about inventing the tool, it's also about figuring out the best, most responsible way to use it. Maybe think about applying that deep dive mindset yourself. When you encounter exciting new claims or technologies, dig a little deeper. Look not just at the flashy results, but also at the methods behind them. That's where true understanding often lies.